I still remember the smell of the lilies that morning, too sweet, almost suffocating. The church was filled with people dressed in black, whispering words that sounded more like echoes than condolences. My hands trembled as I held the rosary, not out of devotion, but because it was the only thing that kept me from collapsing. My husband was gone. After 52 years together, the house we built, the dreams we shared, and even the silence between us, everything felt heavier than the coffin itself. As the priest spoke, my mind drifted. I wasn't really there. I kept seeing his face, his last smile, and the way he squeezed my hand before taking his final breath. Something about his death didn't feel complete. Not wrong, just unfinished. Like a book that ended mid-sentence. People said I was imagining things, that grief makes us see what isn't there. But deep down, I knew something was waiting for me at home. When the ceremony ended, everyone wanted to drive me back. I refused. I needed to go alone, to walk through those doors and feel what remained of him. The moment I stepped into the house, it was as if time had stopped. The same smell of his cologne lingered in the hallway. His hat still hung by the door. But the air felt strange. He used to joke that our house was alive, that the walls held secrets even we didn't know. That day, I believed him. I made tea, though I couldn't taste it. The rain outside began to fall softly, tapping against the windows like a quiet knock. That's when I heard it, a faint, hollow sound behind the wall of his old study. I froze. It wasn't the house creaking. It was different, rhythmic, deliberate. I called his name out of habit, knowing he wouldn't answer. Yet somehow it felt like he was trying to. Grief can make the mind play tricks, they say. But what if it wasn't my mind? What if my husband had left something behind, something he didn't want anyone else to find? That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound behind that wall haunted me, as if the house itself was whispering his name. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I hadn't truly slept, only drifted in and out of restless dreams where I could hear his voice calling my name from behind the walls. The sound from the study echoed again, faint but certain this time. It wasn't the pipes, nor the wind. I'd lived in that house for decades. I knew every creak, every sigh it made. This sound was new, intentional. I walked into his study, the air colder than the rest of the house. The curtains were still drawn, and his desk, oh, that desk, looked exactly as he'd left it. Papers stacked neatly, his fountain pen lying next to the unfinished crossword he started the night before the heart attack. My eyes fell on a small photo of us from our honeymoon, framed in silver. Behind it, the wall had a slight mark, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. A thin crack running down, straight as a line drawn by hand. I touched it, expecting it to crumble like old paint, but instead it sounded hollow. My heart raced. I knocked once. The sound came back, the same hollow echo I'd heard the night before. It felt like the house was breathing. For a moment, I thought about calling someone, a neighbor, maybe my son. But what would I say? There's a ghost knocking behind the wall? They'd think I'd finally lost my mind. So, I did what any curious widow would do. I fetched a small hammer from the drawer where he kept his tools and gently tapped along the wall. Hollow, solid, hollow again until one spot near the corner gave way. The wallpaper was newer there, the texture slightly different. As I peeled it back, a small wooden seam appeared, almost like a hidden frame.
A door.
A door that shouldn't exist. I stood frozen, my breath shallow. My husband had never mentioned this. We'd built this house together. Every room, every inch. And yet, here it was, a secret space, locked away behind wallpaper and silence. My hands trembled as I brushed away the dust from the outline. A chill ran down my spine, but I couldn't stop. Something deep inside me whispered, "He wanted you to find this." That night, I couldn't eat. I sat by the study door for hours, staring at that invisible frame in the wall. Whatever was behind it had been hidden for decades, and now it was calling to me. I just didn't know if it was love or something else entirely. I spent the next day pretending everything was normal. I made breakfast I couldn't eat, dusted shelves that didn't need dusting, and spoke to my husband's photo as if he might answer. But all the while, that hidden seam in the study wall pulsed in the back of my mind, like a heartbeat buried beneath wood and plaster. By evening, I could no longer resist. I went back in. His study was immaculate, almost too immaculate. My husband had been many things: a kind man, a good father, but above all, secretive. He'd always had drawers I wasn't allowed to open, papers I wasn't meant to read. I told myself it was just his way of keeping order, but now I wondered if it was something else entirely. I began to open every drawer, one by one. Inside the second one, under a pile of old tax receipts, I found a small brass key tied to a faded blue ribbon. The kind of ribbon I used to tie around his gifts. My heart stopped. On the tag, written in his handwriting, were 2 words: "For you." My knees weakened. Tears blurred my vision as I held it close. Whatever he had hidden behind that wall, he wanted me to find it, but only after he was gone. The moment I held that key, I heard it again. The same hollow sound from behind the wall, only louder now. Not a knock this time, a single thud, like something shifting in the darkness. I whispered his name, trembling. The house went silent. Even the ticking clock seemed to pause. It was as if time itself was holding its breath. That night, I placed the key on my nightstand and stared at it until I fell asleep. My dreams were filled with our memories. The day we bought this house, his laughter echoing through empty rooms, and his voice whispering, "There are things you'll understand when I'm gone." When I woke, the key was still there, gleaming in the morning light, almost waiting for me to be ready. Morning light crept through the curtains, painting golden stripes across the floorboards of his study. I stood before that hidden seam again, clutching the brass key as if it were sacred. My fingers trembled, not from age this time, but from fear. Fear of what I might find, and of what I might finally understand. I pressed the key against the wall, tracing its edges, and then something incredible happened. The faint outline clicked. It wasn't a normal keyhole. The wall itself seemed to give way, as if recognizing me. I heard a soft metallic sound, like a latch releasing after decades of silence. Dust drifted through the air as the wallpaper shifted slightly outward. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I pressed gently, and the wall moved. A narrow gap appeared, revealing a dark passageway behind it. The air that escaped was cold, dry, and strangely still, like the breath of a forgotten place. I hesitated at the threshold. The smell of old wood and something faintly metallic filled my lungs. I whispered his name again, half expecting a reply. There was none, only silence, and the faint echo of my heartbeat in that hollow space. I lit a candle from the mantel and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the floor, smooth concrete, not the wooden boards of the rest of the house. The walls were lined with shelves, covered in dust and cobwebs. Boxes, notebooks, and what looked like old film reels sat untouched. On one side, there was an armchair, draped with a blanket I recognized immediately. It was his. My husband's favorite blanket, the one he used when he read by the fireplace. My throat tightened. This wasn't just a hidden room. It was a place he had lived in secret. I ran my hand across the chair, the table beside it, the half-empty glass still resting there. Everything was frozen in time, like he'd just stepped out and never returned. The candlelight flickered, throwing shadows that seemed to move on their own. I whispered, "What were you hiding, love?" My voice trembled, the sound swallowed by the walls. Then I saw it, a large trunk against the far corner, sealed with the same kind of brass lock as the key I held. My pulse quickened. The key had opened one door, but maybe it wasn't the only one. I approached the trunk slowly, each step echoing softly against the cold floor. The candle flame quivered, as though the air itself held its breath. The brass lock gleamed faintly under the flickering light, the same shade as the key I held. I hesitated for a moment, clutching it in my palm, feeling the weight of what it meant. My husband had hidden this room, hidden it from me, and yet he'd left me the key. When I finally inserted it, the lock turned with an almost tender click, as if it had been waiting for this very moment. The lid creaked open, releasing a breath of stale air that smelled of old paper and something else, something faintly floral, like the perfume I wore in my youth. Inside were stacks of envelopes, photographs, and bound notebooks tied with twine. My hands shook as I lifted the first one. The envelope was addressed to my beloved wife, to be opened when I am gone. My breath caught in my throat. For a moment, I couldn't move. I sat down on the cold floor, candlelight casting long shadows across the wall, and opened it carefully. His handwriting was unmistakable, steady, elegant, the same script that had signed our wedding invitations half a century ago. The letter began softly, almost as if he were speaking to me from beyond the veil. If you are reading this, it means I couldn't tell you everything in this life. But please know, what I hid was never meant to hurt you. It was to protect you and what you didn't know about me. Tears blurred the ink as I read. My mind raced. Protect me from what? The words felt both comforting and haunting. Beneath the letter, wrapped in a piece of cloth, I found a small wooden box. Inside were photographs, not of us, but of people I didn't recognize. A woman with kind eyes, a child, a younger version of my husband standing beside them. My stomach twisted. I whispered his name again, my voice breaking. Who are they? The candle flickered violently, as though stirred by unseen hands. In that moment, a terrible thought crossed my mind, one I didn't dare speak aloud. What if the man I buried wasn't who I thought he was? I stared at the photographs spread across the floor like pieces of someone else's life. The woman had soft, sorrowful eyes, and the child beside her looked about 5 years old, a boy with the same dark curls my husband once had. My hands began to tremble uncontrollably. I wanted to believe this was all a misunderstanding, that the people in the pictures were distant relatives, old friends, anyone but what my heart was beginning to fear. I picked up another envelope, older than the first, its paper yellowed and fragile. Inside were letters written in the same handwriting as the one addressed to me, but these were different, intimate, tender, filled with affection that didn't belong to me. My dearest Clara, one began. The name hit me like a stone. He had called her my love, just as he had called me. The words danced before my eyes as I read about their secret meetings, the promises he had made, and the guilt that had slowly consumed him. The last letter ended abruptly. I cannot choose between you both. Forgive me. My throat closed as tears spilled down my face. For years, I had believed in a love that was pure and faithful. Now, I wasn't sure if any of it had been real. I pressed the letters against my chest, trying to steady my breathing. The candle flickered again, and for a moment I thought I heard footsteps behind me. I turned quickly, but there was no one there, only the shadow of my reflection trembling on the wall. The air grew colder, heavier. Maybe it was my imagination, or maybe the house, burdened by the weight of his secrets, was mourning with me. I gathered the letters and placed them back in the trunk, unable to read more. My hands were shaking too much. As I closed the lid, something metallic slipped from beneath the papers, a small silver locket. Inside it was a picture of the same woman, Clara, and my husband. On the back, engraved in tiny letters, it read, "Until the end, always yours." My world shattered with that inscription. And yet, deep down, I sensed that this wasn't the whole truth, only the beginning of one far darker. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces from the photographs, the woman named Clara, and that boy with my husband's eyes. The house felt heavier now, as if the walls themselves carried their shame. By morning, I decided I needed answers, no matter how painful they'd be. I returned to the hidden room with new resolve and a notebook in hand. The trunk still sat in the corner, open like a wound that wouldn't close. I spread the letters on the table and began to read them again, this time paying attention to dates. The first one was from 1963, 10 years before I even met him. My pulse quickened as I flipped through the rest. The last letter was dated 1971, but my husband and I married in 1972. The timelines overlapped, just barely, but enough to make my stomach twist. He had been with her while he was already courting me. That realization cut deeper than I could have imagined. But what made less sense was how abruptly the correspondence ended. One letter mentioned he was planning to bring her home soon, but after that, nothing. No goodbye, no farewell. Just silence. I searched through the trunk again, desperate to find more. At the very bottom, I discovered a small black notebook with his initials engraved. It was a ledger of sorts, dates, names, addresses. He had been sending money regularly to a woman named Clara Thompson in a nearby town. The payment stopped suddenly the same year we got married. The last entry simply read, "Final arrangement made." My heart pounded at those words. What did that mean? I traced my finger over the last line, the ink slightly smudged, as if written in haste. Something about it chilled me. Why would a loving man, a devoted husband, hide such a past from me? And why, after all these years, did he still keep their photos and her letters hidden so carefully? A dreadful thought began to form in my mind, that whatever he had done, whatever he had buried in this room, was not just a secret of love, but something much darker. I sat at the table, my husband's black notebook open before me, the candle nearly burned to its base. Each page was filled with numbers, names, and cryptic notes that only deepened my confusion. Most entries were neat and methodical until the last few years before his death. His handwriting became erratic, almost desperate, as though the weight of his past was finally catching up to him. I turned one more page, and that's when I saw it, a name that froze the blood in my veins. Written in trembling ink, underlined twice, was Daniel. My son's name. At first, I refused to believe it. There must have been another Daniel, perhaps a business associate or a relative. But as I read further, the words around it made denial impossible. Daniel's tuition, final payment, one note read, Daniel's birthday, June 12th. My hand went cold. That was my son's birthday. But these entries dated before he was even born, 2 years before. The numbers, the dates, the overlapping lines of time. None of it made sense. My husband had always been secretive about money. He claimed he had savings from before our marriage, investments I didn't need to worry about. I trusted him, I always did. But now, staring at this notebook, I realized that Daniel's entire future, his education, even his trust fund, might have been financed by something or someone I was never meant to know. I pressed my palm against the page, tears spilling freely. Could it be? Could Daniel not be my son? Or worse, could he be hers? My mind raced through the years, the small resemblances I'd brushed off, the moments of distance between father and son, the way my husband always seemed overly protective whenever Daniel asked about his childhood. It was as though he feared the truth would escape. For a long moment, I just sat there, the house silent except for the faint creak of old wood. And then, from the corner of the hidden room, came a soft, rhythmic sound, the same knock I'd heard since the funeral. 3 slow taps. Pause. Then 3 more. My candle flickered violently, and my voice trembled as I whispered into the darkness. What did you do, Richard? The name Daniel kept echoing in my mind like a bell that refused to stop ringing. I sat there in the dim light, staring at those words written by the man I thought I knew better than anyone. The shadows on the walls seemed to move as if the house itself pitied me. Every instinct inside me screamed that I shouldn't keep reading, that the next truth would shatter me beyond repair. But I couldn't stop. I had to know. I turned the next page of the notebook, and there it was, a letter folded carefully between the entries, hidden as though he couldn't bear to destroy it. The paper was brittle, the ink faded, but the handwriting was his. To Clara, it began. I've done what I must. Daniel will have the life we dreamed for him. She will never know. It's better this way. My hands went numb. My breath hitched as the words blurred in front of me. She will never know. I whispered those words over and over until they lost meaning. My heart pounded so violently that it hurt. The room spun. I thought of Daniel, his smile, his stubborn kindness, the way he used to say, I had the gentlest hands in the world. My son, my boy. Could he truly not be mine? Or had my husband, in some twisted act of love or guilt, taken a child that wasn't ours and raised him as if he were? Memories rushed through me in fragments. Daniel's birth, the quiet hospital room, the nurse who refused to meet my eyes when she handed me the baby. I'd been unconscious for most of the delivery, after a sudden complication that nearly took my life. My husband had told me everything went fine, that the doctors said I'd simply been too weak to hold the baby right away. I never questioned it. Until now. Tears streamed down my face as the air grew colder, heavier. I felt like I was suffocating beneath years of carefully crafted lies. I pressed my forehead against the table, whispering through sobs, "How could you do this to me?" The silence that followed was unbearable until, for the first time, I swore I heard his voice, faint but unmistakable, whisper back from the shadows. Because I had no choice. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my husband's handwriting, those words that tore the ground beneath me. She will never know. The next morning, I made a decision that terrified me as much as it steadied me. If I wanted the truth, I'd have to dig where the past had been carefully buried, the hospital where Daniel was born. The building had changed over the years, but the air was the same, sterile, heavy, filled with whispers of memories best forgotten. I walked to the front desk, clutching my old handbag like a shield. The young receptionist smiled politely when I asked for the maternity records from 1973. Her smile faded quickly when I gave her my name. "Those files are sealed," she said quietly. "Only with special permission." I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "My husband worked for the hospital board," I said. "Richard Evans. He passed away recently. I need to know what happened the day my son was born." Something in her expression changed, an unease, a flicker of recognition. She excused herself, and a few minutes later, an older nurse approached. Her hair was gray now, but her eyes widened when she saw me. "Mrs. Evans," she whispered. "I remember you." Her voice trembled as she guided me to a quiet hallway. "There are things you were never told," she said. My pulse raced. "You went into labor early. There were complications. The baby didn't survive." I froze. My lips parted, but no sound came out. "When you woke up," she continued, "your husband was inconsolable. But later that night, a newborn was left at the hospital, abandoned. He signed the papers before anyone could question him." My knees buckled, and I gripped the wall to stay upright. The world tilted, spinning out of control. Daniel, the boy I had loved, protected, and raised as my own, was never mine. My husband had stolen him from fate, from another woman's arms, to spare me from grief. "He said he couldn't lose you too," the nurse whispered. Her eyes filled with tears. "He told us you would never know." The corridor felt colder than the grave. I pressed my hand to my chest, gasping for air, my heart pounding against decades of deception. The nurse took my trembling hand and whispered one final thing before walking away. Mrs. Evans, the mother, came back. Years later, she was looking for her child. Her words echoed inside me long after she left. She came back. That sentence alone felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. Clara, the woman from the photographs, the one whose eyes still haunted me, had returned. And my husband, my Richard, had known. All these years, he had carried that truth in silence, eating away at his conscience until it finally buried him along with his lies. I stumbled out of the hospital, the autumn wind biting at my face. My legs moved on instinct, but my thoughts spun in chaos. Every moment with Daniel replayed in my mind, his first steps, his laughter, the way Richard used to watch him with a kind of sorrow that I mistook for tenderness. Now I understood. That look was guilt. It had always been guilt. Back home, I sat in the study again, the candlelight trembling as though it shared my pain. I opened the trunk once more, hoping for answers, praying for closure. And there it was, another letter, tucked inside the pocket of the blanket I'd seen draped over his chair. My hands shook as I unfolded it. The ink was smeared, but I could still read the words. "Clara came by the house. She wants to see him. I couldn't let her. Not now. Not after all these years. She doesn't understand. He's better off here. I covered my mouth, trying to contain the sob that escaped. He had denied a mother her child. The man I had loved for half a century had stolen another woman's motherhood and turned it into my blessing. I wanted to hate him, to curse his name, but the cruelest part was that I couldn't. Because without his sin, I never would have known the boy who became my world. That night, as the rain beat against the windows, I heard the house creak again. The same pattern, 3 slow knocks, pause, 3 more. Only this time, it didn't come from the hidden room. It came from Daniel's old bedroom upstairs. I froze, the letter still in my trembling hand. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if it was the house speaking or something else that refused to rest. I stood at the foot of the stairs, the letter still clutched in my hand, my breath shallow. The house was silent except for that sound, 3 deliberate knocks, then a pause, then 3 more. The same pattern that had followed me since the funeral. But now it was coming from above, from Daniel's old room. My heart thudded, so hard I could hear it echoing in my ears. Each step creaked as I climbed, the air growing colder with every foot I ascended. When I reached the door, I hesitated. It had been years since I'd entered that room. Daniel had moved out long ago, but everything remained just as he'd left it, his childhood drawings still pinned to the corkboard, the smell of dust and faint cologne lingering like a ghost of the past. The knocking stopped the moment I turned the doorknob. I pushed the door open slowly, my candle trembling in my hand. Nothing moved. The air was still, yet heavy, charged, almost electric. I whispered his name, Daniel, knowing he wasn't there. My eyes scanned the room until they landed on the old wooden desk by the window. Something had shifted. A small box, one I'd never seen before, sat neatly in the center, its lid slightly ajar. I approached cautiously, my pulse racing. Inside the box were old keys, trinkets, and a folded piece of paper. My hands shook as I unfolded it. It was a note, written in Richard's familiar handwriting. If you found this, then the truth has reached you. I only ask one thing, protect him. The past is not done with us. A chill spread through me, deeper than fear. The candle flickered violently, its flame bending toward the window. I turned, and for a fleeting second, I saw a shadow, tall and familiar, standing by Daniel's bed. My husband's outline, clear as day. I gasped, stepping back, and the candle went out. When I lit it again, the shadow was gone. But on the bed, where the darkness had been, lay another letter, one I knew I hadn't placed there. My voice cracked as I whispered, Richard, what are you trying to tell me? And somewhere in the silence, from behind the walls, or maybe from beyond them, came a whisper so soft I almost thought I imagined it. She's still looking for him. The whisper wouldn't leave me. She's still looking for him. The words rolled in my head over and over until I wasn't sure if I'd truly heard them or if grief had finally broken me. But deep inside, something told me it was real. Clara's spirit, the woman my husband had wronged, was still searching, bound by the same love and pain that once kept her alive. For the first time, I began to feel that the house wasn't haunted by Richard at all. It was haunted by her. Every flicker of light, every cold draft, every creak in the hallway, I could feel her presence watching me, pleading for something I didn't yet understand. I lit every candle I could find, the flames trembling as if afraid of what surrounded them. That night, I dreamt of her. Clara stood in the garden outside my window, her dress moving with the wind though the air was still. Her eyes were filled with sorrow, not anger. She didn't speak, but I understood what she wanted. She was looking for her son, for Daniel. When I woke, the room smelled faintly of lilacs, the same perfume I'd smelled on the letters from the trunk. I wandered the house in the early hours, following that scent. It led me to the hidden room once more. The candlelight shimmered on the walls, and there, beside the trunk, lay something that hadn't been there before, a child's toy. A small wooden car. I gasped. Daniel's favorite toy from when he was 5. I'd lost it decades ago. My hand trembled as I picked it up, my heart pounding in my chest. Tears welled in my eyes as realization sank in. Clara wasn't haunting this house to torment me. She was searching for closure, for the boy who had been taken from her arms. And maybe, just maybe, she believed I could help her find him. But as I held the toy and whispered a prayer for forgiveness, the air behind me grew cold again, and a woman's soft voice, close enough to feel her breath, whispered, "Bring him home." The whisper, "Bring him home," lingered in the air long after it was spoken, echoing like a command written into my soul. I knew what it meant. Clara wasn't asking me to open another door or search another letter. She wanted me to tell Daniel the truth, to set her spirit free by giving back the son she had lost. But how could I? How does a mother tell her child that her motherhood was built on a lie? I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, the candle flickering beside a cup of untouched tea. The house felt different now, as though it were holding its breath. Even the silence had weight. I watched the first light of morning pour through the window, and I knew what I had to do. I picked up the phone and dialed Daniel's number. My fingers trembled, my throat dry. When he answered, his voice was gentle, unaware of the storm I was about to unleash. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked. I hesitated. "Daniel, there's something you need to know. It's about your father." There was a pause, a hesitation in his breathing. "What about him?" I could barely get the words out. "I found something. Letters, documents, things he kept hidden from us. About your birth." There was a long silence on the other end, then a sharp exhale. "Mom, what are you talking about?" His tone shifted from confusion to worry. I told him about the hidden room, the trunk, Clara, and the nurse's confession. Every word felt like tearing a piece of myself away. When I finished, there was nothing but silence. "So, you're saying you're not my mother?" His voice cracked. Tears streamed down my face as I gripped the phone. "I may not have given you life, my son, but I am your mother. I raised you. I held you. I prayed for you every night. Nothing can change that." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, softly, "I need to come home." When I hung up, I felt both lighter and hollow. The truth had finally been spoken, but it came with a price. The air in the room grew still, and from the corner of my eye, I saw something, a faint shimmer near the window. Clara's figure stood there, her expression softer now, her eyes glistening with tears. She didn't speak, but I understood. The first step to peace had been taken. By the time Daniel's car pulled into the driveway, dusk had already fallen. The house, once a sanctuary of silence, now pulsed with a strange anticipation, as if the very walls knew that tonight would change everything. I stood by the window, watching his headlights fade through the fog, my heart pounding like it did the day I first held him in my arms. Only this time, I wasn't sure if he would still see me as his mother when he walked through that door. When he entered, he didn't say a word. His eyes were red, his jaw tense. He looked around, his gaze landing on the half-open study door, the one that now led to everything hidden. "Where is it?" he asked quietly. His voice wasn't angry. It was heavy, like a man carrying too many questions. I led him inside without a word. The candlelight flickered against the walls, illuminating the trunk, the letters, and the lingering scent of old secrets. He knelt before the trunk, picking up the letters with shaking hands. I watched his expression shift: confusion, disbelief, sorrow. "She wrote to him," he murmured, unfolding one of Clara's letters. His eyes darted to mine. "You knew her name before I told you?" I nodded. "I found the photographs. And the nurse told me what happened." He swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "So he took me? He just took me?" I wanted to reach for him, to hold him the way I did when he was a child, but my arms felt like stone. "He thought he was saving me," I whispered. "He couldn't bear to lose me after losing you. He believed he was doing the right thing." Daniel let out a hollow laugh, one that quickly turned into sobs. "He stole me, Mom. He stole me from her." The word "Mom" cut through me like a blade, and a blessing all at once. I stepped closer and placed my trembling hand on his shoulder. "He made a terrible choice, but I loved you every day of your life. I still do." He looked up at me then, his eyes full of pain and compassion. "And I love you too," he said softly. "But I need to know who she was." As he said it, a sudden gust of cold air swept through the room. The candles flickered wildly, their flames bowing toward the hidden wall. Both of us froze. From deep within the shadows came a faint voice, a woman's voice, trembling, yearning. "Daniel. Daniel," and I froze as the voice whispered his name again. Daniel. It was faint, but unmistakably human, trembling with longing. The sound didn't echo through the air like a normal voice. It seemed to seep from the very walls themselves. He looked at me, wide-eyed, pale as paper. "You heard that too, didn't you?" he whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. The air turned cold enough to see our breath. The flame of the candle between us bent sharply toward the hidden passage in the study. Without thinking, Daniel grabbed a flashlight from the drawer and stepped closer. "Mom, stay here," he said firmly. But I couldn't. Whatever force haunted that place had drawn both of us into its web, and I knew that this night would not let us rest until the truth was complete. We walked into the hidden room together, the silence so deep that even the sound of our footsteps seemed wrong. The walls looked different now, darker, as if stained by something old. The trunk was open again, though neither of us had touched it since the day before. Inside, the letters fluttered slightly, moved by an unseen breeze. The whisper came again, clearer this time, filled with anguish. "My son." Daniel stumbled backward, pressing a hand to his chest. "She's here," he muttered. His voice trembled, but not from fear, from recognition. I could see it in his eyes. Something deep within him knew that voice. He turned slowly, facing the far corner of the room where the candlelight struggled to reach. A figure began to form from the darkness, faint at first, then clearer, until the outline of a woman stood before us. Clara. Her eyes shimmered with tears, and though her lips didn't move, her voice echoed softly inside my mind. "I never stopped looking for you." Daniel took a step forward, tears streaming down his face. "You're her," he whispered. "You're my mother." The spirit nodded, a sorrowful smile passing through her translucent face. The air filled with warmth, not of this world, but of forgiveness long overdue. I watched, frozen between pain and awe, as my son knelt before the ghost of the woman who gave him life. The house that had carried our lives for decades now bore witness to the truth, and for the first time since Richard's death, I felt the weight of his secrets begin to lift. But deep in my heart, I sensed this wasn't the end. Clara's spirit had found her child, yet something still bound her here. Something left unfinished. The room felt suspended between worlds, half drenched in candlelight, half swallowed by shadow. Clara stood before us, her form wavering like smoke caught between breaths. Daniel knelt in silence, his tears falling soundlessly onto the cold floor. I could feel the weight of her sorrow pressing into the air. Every heartbeat in that moment belonged to her grief. She looked not at me, but at him, her son, the one who had been stolen, then loved by another. Her voice came like a whisper carried on the wind, yet it filled the entire room. "I searched for you, Daniel. Every day, every night. When they told me you were gone, I refused to believe it. I prayed for years until the prayers turned into silence." Her words trembled, and her face softened. "But he promised me something." Daniel's eyes lifted. "Who? My father?" The spirit nodded slowly. "He said he would make it right before he died. That he would bring us peace, all three of us. But he didn't finish his promise." Her translucent hands trembled as she turned toward me. "He left something behind, hidden from both of us." My pulse quickened. The hidden room that had already revealed so much still held another secret. Clara's form began to flicker, her light fading in and out like a dying candle. Daniel reached for her, but his hand passed through her image like mist. "Wait! What did he hide?" he pleaded. Her voice weakened, stretched thin by the pull of whatever lay beyond. "Find the box he buried. The one with his name. Only then can I rest." And then she was gone, the air collapsing into silence, the room suddenly ordinary again. Daniel sank to his knees, his body shaking as if the moment had drained him of all strength. I touched his shoulder gently, whispering, "She's free when we find it." He looked up at me, his face pale but resolute. "Then we'll find it, whatever it takes." As we left the hidden room, I noticed something I hadn't before, a faint draft coming from the floorboards beneath the trunk, cold and steady. I knelt down, brushing away the dust, and there it was, a small metal latch embedded in the wood. A secret beneath a secret. Richard's final lie, or his final act of redemption. Daniel and I knelt side by side before the latch, the candlelight trembling as if aware of what we were about to uncover. I brushed away the layers of dust until the small metal handle gleamed faintly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel whispered, "Do you think this is what she meant?" I nodded slowly. "Your father never built anything without a reason. This must be it." With a deep breath, Daniel pulled the latch. The floor creaked, releasing a stale breath of air that smelled of age and secrets. Beneath the wooden planks was a narrow compartment wrapped in cloth, untouched for decades. Inside lay a small iron box, heavy despite its size. The initials Ari were carved faintly on the lid, Richard Evans. My husband. Daniel lifted it carefully, setting it on the table beside the trunk. The lock was rusted, but intact. "We'll need something to pry it open," he murmured. But before he could fetch a tool, the lock gave way on its own, snapping open with a sound that made both of us flinch. It was as if the box had been waiting, not to keep secrets in, but to finally let them go. Inside was a stack of envelopes tied with black ribbon, and beneath them, a leather-bound journal. The top envelope was addressed to me. My hands shook as I unfolded it. "My love," it began, "if you've found this, I am no longer among the living. What you've learned was never meant to destroy you, only to free you. I took Daniel not from greed, but from a promise. I swore to protect him, not from Clara, but from what she was running from." I looked up at Daniel, his brow furrowed. "What she was running from," he repeated. I turned to the next line, my heart sinking as I read. Clara was not who she said she was. And the boy, he was never meant to exist. The words blurred as a chill spread through the room. Daniel's voice cracked. "What does that mean?" But before I could answer, the candle flickered violently, and for a heartbeat, the shadow of a man appeared on the wall behind us. Richard's voice, faint but clear, whispered, "Finish what I started." The journal felt alive in my hands, its leather cracked but pulsing faintly, as if the years hadn't drained it of life, but trapped something within it. Daniel stood behind me, silent, his eyes fixed on the faded initials engraved on the cover, Ari. The air was heavy, charged with an energy that didn't belong to this world. I hesitated, then opened it. The first page carried a short inscription written in my husband's familiar, precise hand. "To whoever finds this, truth is a burden, not a gift. But some burdens must be carried, even after death." The pages that followed were filled with hurried handwriting, sketches, and symbols I didn't recognize. At first, it looked like nonsense, lines of scripture intertwined with numbers, diagrams of the house, and fragments of Latin phrases. But one passage stood out, circled in black ink. Clara sought to undo what was done in 1971, but some lives cannot return without taking another in their place. My blood ran cold. "Undo what was done," I whispered. Daniel leaned closer, his voice unsteady. "Mom, he's not talking about me, is he?" I wanted to deny it, but my throat tightened. The next pages revealed the truth we'd both feared and never imagined. Clara had been part of something beyond the natural, a ritual of desperation, an attempt to bring back the child she had lost before Daniel was born. Richard had been there when it went wrong. The result was Daniel. According to the journal, the child who died was named Elias. Clara's grief had driven her to seek help from forces she didn't understand. Richard had tried to stop her, but by the time he intervened, something had already crossed over. The boy that lived, Daniel, wasn't born like others. He was the merging of what remained of Elias's spirit and Clara's last breath of life before she disappeared. Daniel's face went pale as the truth sank in. "You mean I'm not even real, he whispered. I reached for his hand, shaking my head fiercely. You are real. You're my son, no matter where you came from. But inside, my heart trembled. The candlelight danced across the pages, illuminating one final line, written shakily in Richard's last days. If the ritual ever calls for balance, protect him, for death will come to reclaim what never belonged. The room grew colder. Somewhere deep in the walls, that familiar knocking began again. Slower this time, but louder. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. And for the first time, Daniel heard his name spoken from the darkness, not by a ghost, but by something older, deeper. The knocking grew louder, not just from the walls, but from within the house itself, as if the very foundation pulsed in rhythm with Daniel's heartbeat. His breathing quickened, his skin pale beneath the flickering light. Mom, he whispered, clutching his chest. It feels like something's moving inside me. The words chilled me to the bone. The air turned thick, heavy, almost impossible to breathe. The flame of the candle stretched tall and thin, its glow swallowing the shadows instead of casting them. The house began to moan, a deep, low groan, like wood bending under unbearable weight. I reached for Daniel, but the moment my fingers touched his skin, a jolt of energy surged through me. It wasn't pain, it was like touching lightning, a vibration that shook my bones. Daniel cried out, doubling over, his voice echoing with something that wasn't entirely his own. And then I heard it, a child's voice, faint but clear, whispering through his ragged breaths. Where is she? Where is my mother? My heart stopped. It was Elias, the lost child, the spirit that had clung to Daniel since his birth. He was awakening. Elias, I said softly, my voice trembling. Your mother found peace. She came for you. But Daniel's eyes lifted toward me, and for a moment, I didn't recognize them. They were darker, deeper, and filled with something ancient. He stood slowly, every movement deliberate, as if guided by invisible strings. She can't leave, he said, but the voice wasn't his. It was layered, 2 tones overlapping, Daniel's and a child's. She's bound here, until he pays. His gaze shifted toward the hidden floorboards, toward the box and the journal. I realized then, the promise Richard had made to Clara hadn't been fulfilled. He hadn't set Elias free, he had only trapped him inside his son. The room began to shake. Books fell from shelves, the trunk creaked, and the air filled with the scent of smoke and lilacs, Clara's fragrance. Daniel, I shouted, grabbing his shoulders, forcing him to look at me. You are not what happened to you. You're my son. Do you hear me? For a second, his expression softened, his eyes flickering between Daniel and Elias. Mom, he whispered. It hurts. I held him tighter, refusing to let go, even as the house roared around us. Then let it hurt, I said through tears, because pain means you're still alive. And in that moment, a scream, not human, not spirit, tore through the air and vanished into silence. The candle went out, plunging everything into darkness. When I struck a match again, Daniel lay on the floor, motionless, and the journal beside him was open to a single line written in blood-red ink. To save the living, the dead must finally rest. Daniel's body was still, his skin cold under my trembling hands. For a moment, I thought I had lost him, that the thing my husband tried to contain had finally claimed its due. But then, a shallow breath escaped his lips, fragile but real. Mom, his voice was faint, uncertain, as if 2 souls were fighting for space inside him. I held him close, whispering, I'm here, my love. You're safe now. But deep inside, I knew safety was an illusion. The journal still lay open beside us, its ink shifting in the candlelight, as though the words themselves breathed. The phrase, to save the living, the dead must finally rest, repeated over and over on the page, etched by an invisible hand. I turned the page with shaking fingers, and a new message appeared, written in Richard's handwriting. The ritual can be undone, but only with both mothers present, the one of blood and the one of love. My heart raced. Both mothers. Clara and me. That was the promise Richard had failed to complete. He tried to save everyone, Clara, the boy, even me, but death had taken him before he could finish what he started. Now the task had fallen to me. I lit the last candle, its flame the only light between us, and the darkness closing in. Clara, I whispered into the shadows, if you can hear me, come. Let us end this. The air grew thick, humming like the sound before a storm. The scent of lilacs filled the room again, and a soft glow formed near Daniel's body. Clara appeared, faint, trembling, her eyes locked on her son. She knelt beside him, her transparent hand hovering over his chest. He's caught between, she said softly. I can pull him to me, but it will cost him everything that makes him him. My voice broke. There has to be another way. Clara looked at me with sorrow deeper than any I'd ever seen. There is one. You must give what I lost, love without claim. If you let him go, if you forgive what was taken, he will remain whole. Tears streamed down my face. I forgive you, I whispered. And him. And Richard. I forgive it all. The room erupted in blinding light. Daniel gasped, his back arching as if life itself was being torn from him. Clara's figure reached for him, her hand touching his chest, and then dissolving into light. The candle's flames split into two, merging again as one. When it dimmed, only Daniel remained, his eyes open, his breath steady. The knocking had stopped. The air was finally still. He looked at me weakly and smiled. She said thank you. And I knew, for the first time in half a century, the dead were finally at peace. For the first time in years, the house was quiet, not the heavy kind of silence that hides pain behind the walls, but a soft, living stillness. The air felt warm again, and the faint scent of lilacs that once carried sorrow now lingered like a benediction. Dawn broke through the windows, spilling light onto the old floorboards, and I realized the house wasn't haunted anymore. It had simply been waiting to breathe again. Daniel sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, his gaze lost in the horizon. His face looked different now, older somehow, yet lighter, as though a shadow had finally lifted from his soul. I brought him tea, and when he turned to me, his eyes were clear, peaceful. She's gone, he said softly. Not gone home. I nodded, unable to speak, my throat tight with gratitude and grief all at once. We decided to seal the hidden room that morning. Together, we placed the journal and the box back beneath the floorboards. No one should ever open this again, Daniel said, his hand steady over the wood. I placed my palm over his. Some truths are not meant to be forgotten, I whispered, only laid to rest. The floor creaked gently, almost like a sigh of relief. For the first time, I felt the house exhale. Weeks passed, and life returned, quietly, humbly. Daniel visited often, and though we never spoke of that night again, the bond between us deepened. There was no more doubt, no more fear of what made us family. He was my son, not by blood or fate, but by love, the kind that survives lies, death, and even time itself. Sometimes, when I walk through the hallway, I still feel a gentle presence, not haunting, not sorrowful, just watching over us. Perhaps it's Richard, finally at peace with a promise he couldn't keep in life. Or perhaps it's Clara, grateful that her child found both mothers in one heart. Either way, the house that once whispered secrets now hums with quiet harmony. It no longer keeps the past, it carries it gently. And when I blow out the last candle each night, I swear I hear a whisper of two voices blending into one. Thank you.